living in that constant battle zone of opposition with an ex, it's exhausting. It's emotionally draining. And staying stuck there, it's just not healthy for any of you, especially not for the kids. So if you happen to be sick and tired of living in the cycle of opposition, guess what? You can be the one to make a difference by using the tools that we're talking about today. And this is going to ultimately benefit the kids.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey, thanks for joining us today.
Yes.
We are always glad to have you here and grateful to be supporting you.
Yeah, welcome.
We want to give a quick shout out and a thank you to a couple of listeners who have shared some feedback with us through reviews over on Apple Podcasts. One of them said, I've enjoyed so many episodes and have implemented several of the strategies on my own. And man, I wish we could see your name over there. But you know who you are, and we're so excited to hear that you're implementing what you're learning. And it's our hope that we're making a difference for you and for your family. We also recently heard from one listener who previously engaged in coaching with us, and he said, I can tell you that they are the real deal and that they're teaching from a place of truth and personal experiences. Hey, thanks for that, my friend. And you know who you are as well. And our thoughts and prayers are still with you as you move forward. You know, if you've just found our podcast, then we encourage you to go ahead and subscribe right now so that you don't miss any of the episodes. And then after you've heard a few episodes, would you consider maybe leaving us a rating or a review on whatever your favorite listening platform might be? Just like these listeners who are just sharing their experiences with us, we would really appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we really want to hear from you, and we're definitely grateful for your feedback. So thanks so much for that, guys. We really appreciate it. And I say we go ahead and just jump into today's episode.
Right, because today we're going to chat about a simple strategy that can create more cooperation in your co-parenting relationship. We all want that, right?
Yeah. And the best part is you already know this strategy.
You do. And although it's simple, this approach is not always easy. But blended family life isn't for the faint-hearted, right? And the truth is that doing things that aren't easy is something we're all used to doing if we're living in blended family dynamics. And we're always asking you to do things that aren't easy. So we want to work toward understanding our complexities, and we're trying to take the healthiest approach to all of the challenges that we're facing, which really is never easy. Yeah. So even though this co-parenting approach might be a bit difficult, we should at least be open to understanding why it's important and be willing to give it a try, even if it's on a small scale at first. So before we dive into the actual strategy, honey, what are some of the reasons it's important to create more cooperation with the ex and that other home in the first place?
Yeah, that's really a great question. You know, it seems like we instinctually know that cooperation should be a goal, but we don't always stop to think about why. And when we lose the why in all of this, it's easy to simply point fingers at everybody else in our parenting coalition rather than staying focused on our own words, our own choices, and our own behaviors. And by the way, I just used the term parenting coalition. It's important to keep in mind that your parenting coalition is comprised of everyone who shares responsibility for child rearing tasks or has an invested interest in the kids. It includes the significant adult influences in your children's lives. You know, primarily that's parents and step-parents, right? But it could sometimes include grandparents and ex-in-laws and step-grandparents and extended family members. There's a lot of relationships that exist within blended family life. So let's consider some of the reasons why this is an important topic for every blended family that have kids moving between two homes. Why building a cooperative relationship with reasonable collaboration really needs to be a priority. We'll experience more peace in our home. That's one reason. We could all use just a little bit more peace, right?
That's a big reason.
It is, yeah. Another reason is that our kids won't have to carry any more of the emotional burden of that ongoing conflict, unpredictability, stress, and those uncomfortable transitions. We really want to minimize this as much as possible for the kids. Also, our kids, we don't want them to have to feel like they need to mediate or relay information, take over responsibilities that really belong to the adults. And we don't want them to feel like they have to be the peacemakers between us. That's not the kids' jobs. And finally, we want to protect our kids from being stuck in the middle of these two homes that maybe are at war, and instead allow them to experience some peace, to free them up just to be the kids. This is a tremendous gift for them. If your home and your kids' other home are able to work through some differences, handle disagreements well, build healthy communication habits, and cooperate in a way that focuses on what's best for the kids, this really makes a huge, huge difference for them.
Absolutely.
And these are just some of the whys behind the importance of our subject today. Psychologist and researcher John Gottman says this: just as a tree is affected by the quality of air, water, and soil in its environment, the emotional health of children is determined by the quality of intimate relationships that surround them. It hardly matters whether a couple is married, separated, or divorced. When a mother and father display criticism, defensiveness, and contempt toward each other, their children suffer. These children experience high levels of stress and various social, intellectual, behavioral, and physical health problems.
Wow.
That's what the research shows.
Yeah. The main point is that kids simply aren't meant to deal with high levels of hostility between their parents. And this is true whether it's a first family where the parents are still married, or if the parents are divorced and are now single parents or remarried and blending a family.
Yeah.
What kids need most is for their parents to work together. As you read that, I can just imagine that sad, withering tree that Gottman paints a picture of, or a child in this case, surrounded by toxic levels of conflict, struggling to survive in this unhealthy environment.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the child that I'm picturing here is my daughter, Annika. If you know anything about our story, you know that we experienced a peaceful, cooperative co-parenting relationship with my ex from the time we divorced when my daughter was 2 until she was about 12.
Yep.
And then things abruptly shifted and we experienced extreme circumstances of parental alienation. We were forced into a 3-year court battle to protect my daughter and to fight for my parental rights. And those 3 years were filled with high conflict between the two homes. So we know from our own personal experience the difference in how kids are able to manage life in both circumstances.
We've seen both sides of the coin.
Yeah. My daughter Annika, she went from being a pretty carefree, high-achieving preteen to an anxious and troubled kid who seemed to struggle through every aspect of her life in those two situations. And now she's 25 years old, and I can still see the impact of those conflicted years on her emotional maturity and her capacity to handle stress.
Yeah,
she has a lot of anxiety now, and that wasn't present before. So hopefully you aren't dealing with the extreme circumstances like we were. But even common dynamics between divorced parents can come with conflict that creates tension and anxiety for kids. And we know that no one wants to cause their kids harm. But sometimes we can unintentionally heap this burden of stress on our kids when we engage in conflict with the other home. And I know I haven't always handled this well. I've contributed to some of the harm my daughter experienced along the way. And, the reality is that parenting is a hard job. None of us have it all together, and we're going to make mistakes. And co-parenting with an ex can be an incredibly hard job, especially if you don't have a cooperative or a collaborative relationship and there's ongoing conflict. And when this is the case, the kids are the ones who suffer. So we want to stay focused on practical ways to minimize these burdens for our kids because there's just so much at stake here.
That's
there really
right.
is.
That's right. There's a lot at stake. And whether you're in those extreme circumstances that Kim just described that we experienced, or even if you're in a somewhat cooperative co-parenting situation, it's always healthy to explore what you can do to foster a more collaborative relationship with everyone in your parenting coalition. So the principles that we're digging into today are your responsibility, regardless of how the other members of your coalition choose to behave, and maybe even more important, when disagreements are actually causing conflict.
Yes.
And what we really want to do is to give you a specific strategy with some simple steps that you can use to create more cooperation and some stability for the kids in pretty much any challenging situation with anyone in your parenting coalition. And here's the great news. I said it a minute ago. You already know this strategy. You just may not have thought about it quite in the way that we're going to discuss it today. Just about everyone has heard of this, regardless of their family background, their community culture, or their faith affiliation. This simple strategy has crossed geographic borders, spanned over a multitude of generations. You're probably going to know it. And likely, you know it as the golden rule. Okay. You're probably thinking, yeah, I've heard all this before. Maybe you've heard it from your parents, or maybe you just heard it from your grandma. But hang in here with us. Don't tune us out right now, because within the context of our co-parenting struggles, the golden rule is often really misunderstood. But with a little bit of understanding, it can become a powerful tool to help transform a toxic environment and create more peace for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, the first misunderstanding about this whole thing is that people think the golden rule just means being nice at all costs or disregarding appropriate boundaries. And that's not it at all. It's about doing what you can to promote effective communication and break unproductive cycles of conflict. That's the core of what it's about. And you probably already know that living the golden rule basically means to treat others in the way that you want to be treated. And again, that often gets translated into, well, I just need to be nice. But Kim and I believe that there's more to it. And most of us kind of skip what it actually takes to accomplish treating others the way we want to be treated. And really the first step is to take some time to define how we actually want to be treated by others.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm betting you'd like to be treated with respect and courtesy, or you'd like your ex to address parenting issues in a calm, reasonable manner. You likely want your ex to set a positive example for your kids in resolving conflict in a peaceful and cooperative way, right? Take some time to really think about how you'd like to be treated. Maybe you don't want to be bullied or pressured into making snap decisions. Maybe you'd appreciate if they would refrain from using profanity or throwing your past mistakes in your face. It could be anything that you find upsetting, offensive, or counterproductive, right? But the first step in actually living out the golden rule is to define it in clear terms, what it actually means. And we encourage you to take the step of really writing all of those things down and allowing them to become your personal barometer for behavior. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Once you've identified how you want to be treated by your ex and the rest of your parenting coalition and captured your barometer for behavior down on paper, guess what? You've now discovered how you need to be consistently treating them. Now, hang in there with us. Please stop and ask yourself this question. How can I expect the members of the other household to treat me the way I want to be treated if I'm not intentional in my own behavior towards them?
That's right.
Now, if you have the courage to honestly ask and answer this question, you'll realize that you really can't expect respectful behavior from someone that you're not treating with respect. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's truly up to you to do something different in how you interact with your parenting coalition if you want to experience something different, if you want your kids to experience something better. The real challenge to truly living the golden rule is that we must hold ourselves accountable for our own behavior, despite what others do. And over time, living out the golden rule can make a difference in how your parenting coalition responds back to you. It's not as much fun being mean and nasty to someone when they're treating you with kindness and respect. They kind of gets old.
Yeah, but living out the golden rule and following our barometer for behavior isn't very easy.
Oh, no.
Especially if there's been a pattern of poor communication or maybe some animosity. So we want to map out some practical things that you can think about and do when you're faced with a challenging situation in the middle of your parenting coalition, right? It's not just fluff. It's not just a saying of live the golden rule. There's some practicality to it.
How do we do it?
Yeah. Now, first, when we find ourselves on the receiving end of hurtful behavior, maybe it was a sneaky attempt to manipulate the situation or an offhand comment that really just struck a nerve. When these things come our way, our natural reaction can tend to be retaliation. The thought process is, hey, they were insensitive and rude toward me, so I'm going to get them back. But of course, that's not living the golden rule, right? If you want to create a healthy change in your interactions, then you're going to need to use that barometer of behavior. How will I treat them based on how I like to be treated? And then take a next step and ask yourself this question. Does this situation require retaliation? Sometimes we allow little things to get under our skin. We make mountains out of molehills, and we're tempted to feed into the drama by retaliating. But is retaliation really going to help in the long run, or will it keep that toxic environment alive?
Good question.
Do you want to be a person that is a retaliator?
Yeah.
You got to ask yourself that. Yeah. Now, there's times when you might need to set a boundary or even take some kind of legal action, maybe engage in mediation, something like that. If the parenting plan isn't specific enough, or if it isn't being followed properly, or maybe your parental rights are being threatened, and there's probably plenty of those kinds of times when boundaries are required, but retaliation is a different thing. And when you're feeling tempted to retaliate or lash out, if you can just stop yourself in the moment and resist that urge to retaliate and instead decide to do something different, then you'll be able to better follow that barometer for behavior and maintain your self-control rather than taking the bait and engaging in an unnecessary, probably unproductive battle that's only going to cause damage to your co-parenting relationship. And ultimately, that creates a toxic environment for your kids.
Yeah, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, but how do we go about doing that?
So rather than reacting to their poor behavior, resist the urge to retaliate, stop, and choose to respond with what we call the 3 C's. So let's go over those.
Yeah.
Now, the first C is curiosity. Get curious about why they might be acting this way. Are they still harboring some old resentment and unforgiveness around past issues? Maybe they're just having a bad day and they've decided to take it out on you.
Well, yeah, that never happens, right?
Or if you've recently remarried, it could be they're feeling uneasy or even threatened by your new partner and their role in the children's lives.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to verbalize your curiosity. It's more about a mindset shift. Rather than reacting to their behavior and retaliating, you're choosing to stay in a neutral mindset of curiosity. Really try to put yourself in their shoes and to understand what might be going on under the surface of their behavior. And do your best not to take things personally. I know this one is really hard. But even when their behavior is really hurtful, Choose to take the high road and let the insults roll off. Your relationship with your ex isn't about the two of you anymore. It's about the kids. So do what you need to do to stay focused on your role as co-parents.
Yeah, that's right. And the next C is for clarification. We've got to learn to ask for clarification when we need it. Many times what happens when these things get tense and emotions start to elevate, we just become angry and defensive. And then they become angry and defensive. And this is when misunderstandings happen. It's when communication breaks down. Instead, we want to avoid these misunderstandings by just choosing to stay focused on the kids. We've got to learn to let the offense roll off. We got to have some thick skin when we live in blended families. Yeah. And simply focus on clarifying what actually needs to take place in order for you to best care for the kids. Is there a decision that needs to be made or an issue around the schedule, something like that? Ask the questions that need to be addressed and don't allow things to get sidetracked. Keep them really simple, clarifying questions that try to understand what the expectations are around the issue. A great way to gain clarity is to paraphrase back what you heard them say, and then maybe give them an opportunity to either confirm that or correct the information. It could sound something like this. I just want to make sure I understand. What I heard you say is that you won't be able to pick Johnny up from baseball practice tomorrow, and you're wondering if I'd be able to adjust the visitation time and pick him up early. Is that right? Do you see how respectful that sounds? And it just gives them an opportunity to respond respectfully in return. Now, sometimes there's more than one issue, right? If that's the case, separate each one and gain clarity before moving on to the next one. So maybe you work that out and they say, yeah, that's exactly right. You say, great. So we've got the schedule figured out. Now, what I also heard you say is that you'd like me to purchase the cleats that Johnny needs because he needs them right away and you don't get paid till next week. Is that right? So we're separating the issues so that we're all very clear.
Yeah, we're getting clarity around each thing.
Exactly.
Now, the third C is to communicate clearly.
Okay, that's 2 C's.
Yeah, I guess we're doing 4 C's instead of 3. Be respectful and professional as you communicate what you're able to do and what you aren't able to do. So it sounds something like this. I am able to shop for cleats this weekend with Johnny, but my budget doesn't allow me to be able to purchase them brand new. I'm sure we can find what he needs at that sports consignment store. I feel that's a reasonable solution. What do you think? Now, if you need more time in the moment to think about the issue at hand, let them know that you'll get back to them and when you'll get back to them.
Yeah.
The key is to be clear and direct so there's no room for misinterpretation or misunderstandings. If there's a disagreement or if they continue to behave poorly towards you, just respectfully end the conversation without feeding into the conflict. Remember your barometer for behavior, right? Now, if it's a big issue that needs to be resolved, let them know that you'll contact them at a later time when you're both able to calmly discuss the issue.
Yeah, that's all really good, because unhealthy barriers to a cooperative relationship are really rooted in poor communication and misunderstandings and a lot of misguided assumptions.
Sure.
So these 3 C's help us to not leave any room for these things to take place. If you're communicating in writing, it's a great opportunity to be concise and use bullet points and really stay focused on the facts and the well-being of the kids. Keep emotions out of your communication and stay in a professional mindset. The 3 C's, getting curious, gaining clarity, and communicating clearly, are in line with living out this golden rule. Like, wouldn't you prefer it if your ex first got curious and tried to understand your perspective before they retaliate against you? And then if they were just able to not retaliate and actually ask clarifying questions so they didn't have misunderstandings themselves, and if they could communicate clearly with you so that you knew exactly what to expect and didn't have to rely on your own assumptions, wouldn't that be great? Like, I would definitely prefer this approach to the game playing and the speculation and the mixed messages that we've experienced over the years, right? And usually that just all led us to more conflict and stress and painful interactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. You're really living the golden rule by first creating your own barometer for behavior based on how you'd like to be treated. Then, whenever you're confronted with a stressful interaction with anyone in your parenting coalition, you're going to keep yourself focused, resist the urge to retaliate, and instead you'll use the 3 C's in response to their poor behavior by getting curious about why they might be acting this way, and then in a calm manner, gain the clarity you need to move forward and then communicate clearly to avoid misunderstandings. So important. And you're doing all of this while focused on the well-being of the kids, right? That's the priority.
That's right.
Now, all of this sounds easier said than done, right?
Yep.
And that can be so true. So let's talk about the cycle of opposition. This is a big thing. Now, it's common for exes to dislike or distrust each other, especially when they're still working through pain.
Yep.
Leftover hurts from the past and unresolved issues can still be present, even years following a divorce.
Sure. Yeah.
And while divorce ends the marital relationship and you're no longer living under the same roof, the truth is that divorce doesn't necessarily mean that the relational dynamics between you have changed.
Yeah, usually
right?
they haven't.
If you disagreed and fought a lot when you were married, chances are these same dynamics will still be prevalent following a divorce.
Yeah, maybe even stronger.
Yeah. So the cycle of opposition that we're going to talk about here, it's something that's often well established even before the divorce occurs. And it continues to be fueled every time you're unable to make a decision or work through something together in a reasonable manner.
Yep.
And when there are these long-standing patterns in your interactions that are part of the cycle of opposition, sometimes divorced couples will immediately jump into these opposing viewpoints, regardless of what their ex is requesting or suggesting. Even when it's a perfectly reasonable request or even a good suggestion, we automatically push back and refuse to even consider what they're trying to communicate. And of course, this often goes both ways. Neither person is really considering what the other is saying and will quickly move to this position of opposition.
Yep.
And often this is rooted in the need to control the situation or because they simply don't trust each other. And if we're really honest, it's sometimes just for spite.
That's right.
Right? I don't want to
right.
agree with them.
And that is the cycle of opposition. As we were talking about this, I had a funny thought. This will date us a little bit. Maybe some of you remember the old store Blockbuster where we actually had to go. You used to rent movies and stuff.
Yeah.
When our mutual kids, Phoebe and Jacob, when they were little, we would take them to Blockbuster. We'd tell them that they could pick a movie for movie night on a Friday night or something like that. And we would then aimlessly wander around the store for about 45 minutes. And every time one of the kids would pick up a movie, they couldn't even get hardly anything out of their mouth. And the other one would just go, nope, nope, back and forth, nope, nope. And it's kind of a funny picture, but man, I remember it so clearly. And I know sometimes as exes, even as adults, we're exactly like those little 6-year-olds at Blockbuster, refusing to agree to a movie
or even consider
it, simply because no, I want to be in control. I want my way.
Your way can't be right.
And if we're really gut level honest, sometimes these arguments we have with our exes is really rooted in just wanting to have our way and be right,
wanting to oppose.
And generally speaking, unchecked conflict and this automatic way that we tend to jump into the cycle of opposition leads to more opposition and then added conflict and so on and so on. The cycle of opposition continues to grow, and usually over time it escalates. It doesn't dissipate. And this is one of the reasons we feel that the golden rule is such a powerful tool in these difficult dynamics, because someone's got to step up and say, okay, enough is enough, right? At Blockbuster, it was us as the parents that had to say enough is enough. But what we were really hoping for at some point is one of the kids to say enough is enough, right?
And to actually agree.
In that Blockbuster situation. Well, somebody in this parenting coalition has to take the lead and say enough is enough and actually choose to break this cycle of opposition. And remember, it's for the sake of the kids and it's for the sake of your own sanity in the long run. Because
Yeah.
living in that constant battle zone of opposition with an ex, it's exhausting. It's emotionally draining. And staying stuck there, it's just not healthy for any of you, especially not for the
Yeah,
kids.
it's not worth it.
Yeah. So if you happen to be sick and tired of living in the cycle of opposition, guess what? You can be the one to make a difference by using the tools that we're talking about today. And this is going to ultimately benefit the kids.
Absolutely.
So when you're in the middle of that challenging interaction, taking the high road, we know it's not easy, but we want you to know it is possible. Rather than feeding into the opposition, choose to try a different approach. Go back and think about how you'd like to be treated by someone who doesn't agree with you. You'd probably want them to hear you out before they just jump in and criticize what comes out of your mouth. You'd probably really appreciate if they'd asked you some clarifying questions to make sure that they truly understand your position rather than reacting with contempt or just dismissing you altogether. You might see some beneficial results for everyone if they just took the time to brainstorm a variety of ideas with you rather than battling over whose way is best and who's going to win the war. All of this sounds like it could be very valuable for a great barometer for behavior.
Absolutely. That's so true.
Yeah.
If you really want to break the cycle of opposition, you'll need to do something new in how you respond. Remember, how can you expect them to listen to your viewpoint or consider your request if you aren't willing to do the same for them? It just doesn't work. Take the time to create your own barometer for behavior around opposition and then choose to live out the golden rule. You can decide now that you're going to opt out of opposition.
I like that. Opt out of opposition.
Regardless of how your ex behaves or how strongly they're opposing you. And the truth is, there are no guarantees with all of this. You can't change your ex's character, and you don't have control over how they show up when the two of you interact. But your best bet is to focus on influencing their behavior over time by consistently showing up differently yourself. You may have years of co-parenting ahead of you. And wouldn't it be great if you could improve your interactions? Think about that. How you choose to treat them, even when they're lashing out at you, that can make all the difference. It won't be quite as satisfying for them to retaliate and oppose you if you're responding in a calm and respectful way. When they realize that you're no longer going to engage in unproductive, hurtful communication, they might just decide it's not worth it for them to continue with this behavior either. So, we get it. We realize that something as simple as the golden rule just isn't easy within these complex dynamics. We've been there. We know.
Yep.
But we don't want you to lose hope, and we don't want you to give up. Decide that you won't contribute to the cycle of opposition and that your behavior will set a good example for the kids. And remind yourself often of what your kids need most. What they really need is for you and their other home to work together as peaceful allies.
That's right. And, like Kim just said, the truth is there's no guarantees that you're going to get your ex to change their behavior. But more importantly, are you going to be satisfied with your own behavior after the disagreement is over? That's really, I want to walk away from these situations knowing that I've set a good example for my child, regardless of how the ex
I showed up well.
That's right. So keep that in mind. Now, let's hit just a couple more thoughts about this golden rule thing. First, when you're in a place that you're not having to deal with a difficult ex, maybe it's been a few days since you've had to interact with them, or you're just maybe generally feeling pretty good emotionally, that's a great time to do what we call a heart check. Take some time to consider what happens inside of you when you do have to interact with your ex or anyone else in the parenting coalition that you tend to have struggles with. And what we mean by that heart check is to ask yourself a few questions and just be really honest about where you're at. Think about, okay, when these interactions take place with the ex or whoever it is in the coalition, what is it that I actually experience inside? Do I feel resentment, irritation, animosity maybe? Even before the conversation starts, do those things start in my heart? Do I feel the need to defend myself or maybe set them straight? Am I feeling a sense of competition toward them and a need to one up them or speak to them in a sarcastic or demeaning way? Like, what are my motives? Am I out to hurt or humiliate them? Am I holding on to grievances from the past or maybe more recently? If any of this is going on inside of you, if you've honestly answered yes to any of those questions, and I know along the way we've had to answer yes to a lot of those questions, right? Then living out the golden rule or any other strategy around cooperative co-parenting, if you're sitting in those places of animosity, it's probably something that you can't realistically manage at that point.
Yeah.
And so you've got to find a different way. And if that's where you're at, we just want to encourage you to be working on forgiveness and what that might look like for your own healing. This is really important, not just for your kids' sake, but really for yours. And if you're listening to this episode and feeling like the tools that we're sharing are like, man, that just feels impossible, then it's likely time for you to explore some avenues for healing. Maybe it's reading a book or listening to a podcast, or maybe even reaching out to us for coaching. We can actually help you with this. In fact, a good place to start could be back on episode 64, where we discussed how to set yourself free by choosing to forgive. In that episode, we shared some really practical ways to move toward forgiveness. And Kim shared how she was able to forgive her ex, even though he really didn't ever change his behavior, and how healthy that process was for you.
Set me free.
It did. That episode might be a great place for you to start if you haven't already listened to it. And we'll certainly link to that episode in the show notes. But don't allow heavy, painful emotions to weigh you down and negatively impact your life. This kind of work, it's not easy. It really takes work, but the long-term payoff is absolutely incredible. And I know that it's going to benefit you and your whole family.
Yes, we really encourage you to take next steps there. And the second thing we want you to consider around all of this is be willing to give grace. The bottom line is that we all need grace when it comes to parenting and step parenting. We'll never have it all together, and every one of us will make mistakes along the way.
That's right.
So here's the challenge. Regularly remind yourself that there's no such thing as a perfect parent or a perfect step parent. Now, you might have some valid concerns about a decision the other home has made or something that someone in your parenting coalition has done. But before you go on a fault-finding tirade, stop and recall how hard it is to be a parent and a step-parent. It's tough work. Don't lose sight of the fact that you too have faltered, right? We can all recall things we wish we would have handled differently when it comes to parenting kids and co-parenting with our ex. So in light of this, be willing to give grace for the other home's imperfections and don't expect that they're going to get everything right all the time, because you probably won't either. And it can help to consider if their decisions around parenting are actually a problem at all, right? Or do they simply have different preferences that are different from yours? If there's nothing innately or morally wrong with their actions, but they just rub you the wrong way or their approach is different than what you prefer, be willing to relinquish your need to have things go your way. Let go of control. There are many different ways to parent children. And just because the other home handles things differently doesn't necessarily mean their way is wrong or bad for the kids. Practice using the golden rule. If you want to be given grace around your parenting decisions, and if you don't want to be hounded with fault-finding, nitpicking, and critical reactions by the other home, then refrain from doing these things yourself. Maybe if you were the first to back off and approach your differences with grace rather than judgment, the rest of your parenting coalition would follow suit, and everyone would treat each other with more understanding and empathy. You know, the bottom line is that raising kids is hard. But if we decide that we're going to treat everyone the same way we'd like to be treated, we'll have a higher capacity at working together as a co-parenting team that's able to function peacefully and stay focused on the kids' well-being. That's the goal.
Yeah, and chances are these two things, doing a heart check and giving grace, this is something you want the ex to do for you. So if we want to live out the golden rule, we've got to do it as well, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. The golden rule isn't just this cute little saying that your grandma used to say to you. It's an actionable and challenging strategy to use consistently. It takes intentional effort. And for the sake of your kids and your own well-being, you need to spend some time working on making it an actionable strategy in your life.
Absolutely.
Take the time to consider how it is that you'd like to be treated and capture your own barometer for behavior.
Yeah, write it down.
That's right. Resist that urge to retaliate. Use those 3 C's. Get curious, gain clarity, and communicate clearly in a way that's respectful. Opt out of opposition. Don't let that cycle just keep keeping you in opposition. Be the one who breaks out of that cycle, and you can use your barometer for behavior to do that.
Yes.
And for extra double points,
bonus,
do that heart check and give grace. Now, clearly, you've made it to the end of the episode. You're still listening. Great job. We want to commend you for that. You're probably considering giving the golden rule a try by now. We're thrilled for you because this is a big step, and it's one that's going to lead to a more cooperative co-parenting relationship over time and a better environment for your kids.
Yes. Now, according to Dr. Gottman, it's not the interparental conflict itself that's so harmful to children, but the way in which parents handle their disputes. Studies show that children may actually benefit from witnessing certain kinds of family conflict, particularly when their parents disagree in a respectful way and when it's clear that the parents are working constructively towards resolution.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's really hopeful, isn't it? And we know that living out the golden rule isn't going to be easy. And if you hit a bump in the road or you need some extra support around all of this, we're here for you if you'd like to schedule a free coaching call.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. There's a link in the show notes. And along with that, we're going to link some related episodes to help you just maybe with things like safeguarding your kids from negative influences in the other home, setting healthy boundaries, parenting when the other home has different rules.
Yeah.
We talked about forgiveness earlier and more tips for coping with a difficult ex. There's also an interview with psychotherapist Liza Gold, who grew up in a toxic environment with her 2 homes at war. And she shares some really great insights and questions that might help you to put your kids first. So we're going to put all of that in the show notes so you can just click away and find all kinds of resources.
Keep learning.
And in the meantime, we want you to start creating more peace for everyone by intentionally living out this golden rule.
You can do it.
That's right. And what great timing this is, because next week we're going to be talking about a topic that everyone across the globe is dealing with right now. And it's going to require you to put the golden rule into action, but not just across households with exes and parenting coalitions, but right in your own home as you interact with each other. So we're going to tackle some of the ways that COVID-19 has been impacting blended families and how you can keep a little more sanity and maybe even enjoy your blended family more even when the pressure is on.
Yes.
You don't want to miss next week. But for now, that makes episode, 67? Yeah, a wrap.
Until next time.